Okay, everybody, welcome to my first two-part video. And I was thinking about doing hemming, but I wasn't sure what to hem. So I decided that I should make some doll clothes, but then that also brings in a casing with elastic. So I'll do one on hemming and one on casing. Normally I do the casing first and then I do the hemming when I'm making a project. So, but this will be one project split into two videos, maybe three, I don't know. All right, anyways, so I started off by trying to find a doll clothes pattern, and I was able to find a pants pattern that would work really well. Okay. But notice that it has straight. This is very square, okay? This makes hemming easy. I noticed that even on this pattern where they brought it in a little bit to make it a little more fitted, they still left this part very, very straight and square, so that way it's easy to hem as well. But in order to show you how difficult hemming can be, I wanted to get one that was like a curved one, an A-line. So I made up this pattern for a half circle skirt, and I had to do all the math right here. So I have the math up here in the corner, and maybe I'll explain the math maybe in a slightly different video. So actually, I'm going to explain the math right now. All right, so first of all, this part right here, where 6.5 inches equals half of a circle, that is because on the pants pattern, minus seam allowance, it was 6.5 inches from seam line to seam line. So that means that before seam allowances, my circle circumference also had to be 6.5 inches, okay? But that was only half the circle. The whole circle, that would only be like half of the waistline. The whole waistline would need to be 13 inches before seam allowances. So that's what equals one circle. So what I did is I took, don't look at this part. I took the equation that circumference equals 2 pi times the radius, and I put in that my circumference needs to equal 13 inches times what, well, and that will equal 2 pi times the radius. And then I did the algebra to get r by itself. So now I divided both by 2 pi. That's why the math is 13 divided by 2 pi. So the radius equals just under 2 inches. Okay? But because this is a half circle skirt, what I'm saying is if it had been a whole circle, then I could have gone with doing just the 2 inches to here and doing that, right? Because this would end up being, when I opened it up, that 6.5 inches, okay? Because this would be half of it, right? If I had, this is 1/4 of the circle. So if I had 4 of these, then all of them together would equal 13 inches from here to here, like all the way around. If I had a whole circle, it would be a 13-inch circumference circle, okay? However, I was making a half circle skirt, and I've already cut it out at this time. So I had to divide by 1/2. Now you might be thinking, don't you need 2 times, or, divide it by 1/2? Divide it by 2? No, because if I divide it by 2, then I end up with a smaller distance. And then if I have this smaller distance right here, then this gets smaller, then I don't have a big enough circumference to get it on the doll's hips. So I knew it had to be bigger. And in order to do that, I divide by 1/2. And whenever you divide by 1/2, you actually flip the fraction and times by it. So this times 1/2, or no, this just a little over 2 divided by 1/2 ends up becoming just a little over 2 times 2/1, and that's how I got 4.138, which equals approximately 1 and an eighth, because 1/8 would be 0.125, so it's pretty close enough for sewing. Okay, that's why this distance, if I was making a full circle skirt, that would work. But because I'm only going to end up using half the circle, and I still want it to be that circle-y shape, I had to measure down 4 1/4, or 4 1/8. It was 4 1/8, right? Yeah, 4 1/8. Measure down 4 1/8 and make that circle-y shape. Okay? So that is how I did that. This is the first time I've ever done a half circle skirt. When I do a circle skirt for a human being, and I'm doing a full circle skirt, I measure where their hips are, the widest part that the skirt is going to have to go over, and then I put that into this equation. So right here, this part right here, the 13, that would be the part that would change, the 13. So whatever it is that you want to be the widest part, like around the hips, so like say you have somebody whose hips measure, or the widest part, fullest part measures at like 30 inches, then I would put it into this equation, right? I'd end up dividing by 2 pi. And so 30 divided by 2 pi, I put it in my calculator. I would find out what the radius is, and then I would fold this, and, well, I wouldn't necessarily have to fold it, but I would at least fold it into quarters, and then measure out whatever that math came out to, and then just come along like this all the way around. Well, it would be 1/4 of it, and then cut along that line. And then when I open it all up, then the circle circumference that I would have should be 30 inches. So that's how the math works. Let me know if that's a little bit too confusing, or what part is confusing, so that way I can clarify it, because it makes perfect sense to me because I was good at math. And if you weren't good at math, I need to know what part is confusing. All right, back to the video. Well, the part of the video that was recorded before, yeah. I did have to make sure, however, after I had done the algebra, to make sure I put the 2 pi in parentheses. Look at this. 13 divided by 2 pi. When I put in 13 divided by 2 pi without the parentheses, then it was doing 13 divided by 2 times pi. So I had to put it in the parentheses so that it would do divided by 2 pi as a whole thing. Anyways, so, and then that would be if I was doing a whole circle skirt. This is in half right now, and this would be one side. But because this is a half circle skirt, I need more than that, so I had to times that by 2, which ended up being about 4 1/4. So from here to here is 4 1/4. This would be 2. It's just a little over 2, so I just did 2. If I was doing a full circle skirt, I would have done this line. And the way that I do that is I just take a ruler and I just measure from the corner out, and then I just move it along like this and just measure it, and then I connect the lines, okay? And for a half circle skirt though, I need this same distance if I were measuring from here to here, but I need it in half of the angle of the, I can't think of the word right now. I need that same amount, but in this much of the segment, right? And so that's why this has to be more, so that way I have the same amount here as in here, okay? Now I've added 1/4 inch seam allowance here, 1/4 inch seam allowance here. I found one of my nifty rulers, and I get these at Hobby Lobby. This I found in the craft section, but they have other ones that have blue lines and like little holes, so you can like mark along the way in the middle, in the quilting section. So I'm going to change camera view so you can see how it adds seam allowance. All right. So this is how I use the ruler. As you can see, the ruler, the little tiny squares, each of them is 1/8. So 2 of them is going to be 1/4. So I just put the ruler right along the edge. I need to find. Okay. So from here to here, it's following this line. Actually, I'm going to start here where everything lines up. From here to here, it's kind of straightish, so I'll just draw from there to there. And then I'm going to adjust. From there to there, it's kind of following it, so I'll follow along there. There to there. Just following. And if it's too long, that's okay. I don't know if there's even 1/4 inch left. Oh, there's just barely. There you go. Now my hem on this skirt is probably going to be more than 1/4 inch, but normally there's 2 folds in a hem, so that'll at least be my first fold. And so now I've got a pattern that I can make a half circle skirt with for this doll. So what I've done now is, because this is 2 layers, before I cut this, I've pinned everything so that I don't have to worry about it shifting and then cutting wrongly. I am using not my fabric scissors. There we go. Now, when I take out the pins, beautiful half circle skirt. There's my beautiful half circle. Technically it's still 1/4 of a circle, but there will be 2 sides, so it'll work out. Okay, so I just drew this casing so that way for the skirt. All right, on the pants, it has this fold line at 1 inch, and then I fold that down, and then I fold this part up 1/4 inch, and then I sew it down to put the elastic in. All right, and that's what I'm emulating here. Okay. So this part right here is going to be my fold line. Okay. And this part right here and right here, those are that's my seam allowance because I have to sew it on. Okay. I have to sew it on. And then this is 6.5. Oh, but I need to add seam allowance there too. So I'm just going to take my ruler, add seam allowance here. Seam allowance here. Okay. On the other pattern, because I'm folding it, I don't need as much seam allowance because it's already connected. This is already connected to it, right? On this one, I need seam allowance because I'm sewing it onto the skirt, okay? I'm going to be left over with 3/4 of an inch in my casing on this one because this part will be folded down 1/4 of an inch. And so there'll be 3/4 of an inch left when I actually sew it down for the 1/2 inch elastic. And because, so that's why I have 3/4 here and 3/4 here, because then when I fold it in half, it'll be 3/4. And then when I sew it, well, it'll be 1 inch. And then after I sew it on, then from here to here will be 3/4 of an inch. So that they are very similar. Okay. All right. So everyone, today I'm wearing my favorite t-shirt. Well, yeah, pretty much my favorite t-shirt. It says, yes, I'm bilingual. I also speak fluent knit. And it's got a knitting pattern down there. It was one of those like Facebook things that my mother-in-law liked and I saw and I liked it, and my husband decided to buy it for me because not only do I knit, but I also happen to be bilingual because I'm fluent English and Spanish. So, you know, yeah, it's gotten pretty beat up because you can tell it's my favorite. Anyways, so that is how to make the pattern for a half circle skirt. And I was going by the measurement of the 6.5 inches from the pants. And spoilers, this is a spoiler alert, this is how it turned out, okay? Because I'm kind of doing these videos out of order a little bit, okay? This is how the pants turned out. Wait, that's the front. There's the front. And this is the back, okay? So it's going on that 6.5 inches measurement from here to here to be able to create that circle. And here is how the skirt turned out. And circle skirts are really nice because they flare out in a very flattering way, but you've got to have that circle in the waistline to get them to flare out nicely like that. So I had to use the pants pattern because I don't actually have any 18-inch dolls here anymore. So it wasn't like there was a doll I could measure and be like, oh, well, this is the widest part that we have to be able to get the skirt up and over. And yeah. So I had to go by what the pattern was for a pants pattern that was made to fit a doll. And anyways, this is how the patterns worked really great. This is the casing, which was cut out of the blue. And then this skirt pattern. So imagine, if you will, that that this becomes a half circle, because if you have the front is one part and then the back is the other part, it would come across just like this. I should have shown that in my sewing of this skirt, but I didn't. If this seam right here, were taken out, it would be a half of a circle. Okay, so the that's how you do the math and how you make a simple pattern. When I do circle skirts for humans, I don't bother to make a pattern unless I need to piece it. So if somebody has a small enough waist that after I've got my circumference in here and the length that I want it from here to here, if that will fit with the pieces of the fabric folded in half that way and folded in half that way, I don't bother to make a pattern. I just mark it right on the fabric, and then I cut it, and then I make a casing that is the same size as that circumference that I was going for, but it wouldn't be a circle, it would be flat. And well, and I need to add seam allowances, right? So this is 6.5 inches wide from here to here, but then I added a 1/4 inch of seam allowance on either side, so this piece is actually 7 inches long. And so that's what I do when I'm making circle skirts. And yes, that is what I do. Oh, and I make sure that I add seam allowance onto the circle skirt. I didn't explain that very well before when I was filming this a couple weeks ago, that I added the seam allowance up that way, the 1/4 inch that way. When you have these curves like this, and I haven't explained this at all, but the bias, which is the crosswise grain of the fabric, stretches out a little bit. So it's actually not too bad having the seam allowance go up this way, because it makes it easier to match the straight, flat, whatever bits of fabric. So anyways, it all makes perfect sense in my head, but it might not make sense in your head. So I don't have a problem explaining myself again, but I need to know which part doesn't make sense. So anyways, I hope that that you are, well, I don't know. I want to say I hope that you understand pattern making now, but there's so much to pattern making. This is a very, very simple pattern making project. And if you don't like math, you can still do it. Just do it little piece at a time. And if you don't, I don't know. I know that for me it makes sense, and I hope that this makes it possible for a lot of people who just didn't get it before to be able to get it. So that's the whole reason for making this particular playlist on this channel. I don't want everybody to just think that sewing is this hard thing that they can't do, and break things up into littler pieces and make it understandable. So I hope that I've been able to do that for pattern making, and good luck. We're now observing the Bruce in his natural habitat. As you can see... Oh, Bruce, you need to stay as a bagel. Oh, man. Well, anyways, that's Bagel Bruce, or Donut Bruce. I think he was called Donut Bruce first, but then Bagel Bruce sounds, with the alliteration, so cute. Bruce, you're cute. Go back to sleep.